In this video, we're going to talk about the American continent, and I'm going to explain everything you need to know for your test tomorrow, all right? Location, how many Americas there are, geology and landforms, climate and vegetation, among many other things, okay? All in a concise, illustrated way. So, sit down in your chair and let's get into the video. Opening. Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're doing well. I'm Paolo, your geography teacher. As always, it's an honor to have you here with me on Geo Illustrata. And in today's video, the American continent. So without further delay, let's get started. First, let's begin by talking about the location. Well, America is located in the so-called Western Hemisphere. That is, it is to the west of the Greenwich Meridian, and it is the largest continent in the world when it comes to latitudinal extension. That is, extension in the north-south direction. And this is essential for determining climate types and also vegetation characteristics, as we will talk about a little later. Overall, America is the second largest continent in the world, with about 42 million square kilometers behind Asia, which has about 44.5, and this continent is bordered by two main oceans, the Atlantic on the east coast of South America and the Pacific on the west coast. Now let's get into another very important and controversial topic, which is this. How many Americas are there? And here the answer varies, okay? Let's understand. But why does it vary, Professor? Isn't it something fixed? No, it depends on the criteria, okay? There is regionalization, which will follow the geographic criteria, basically the location, right? And then the Americas are divided into three. North America, which includes the United States, Mexico, and Canada, Central America, and South America. I'm not listing the countries in Central and South America now, since there are too many. We'll discuss it later. However, it's important for you to know that Central America is divided into two. Isthmian America, or the continental part, which is basically this strip of land that connects South America to North America, and Insular America, which basically corresponds to that group of islands, right? Those smaller countries. However, we also have a second way to regionalize the Americas, which follows the historical cultural criteria, meaning it essentially takes into account the language, the type of colonization, and also the economy. And within this criteria, we have two Americas, Anglo-America and Latin America. And here it's pretty easy to understand, okay? Anglo-America includes the countries where English is the main language, meaning only the United States and Canada. On the other hand, Latin America is basically all the rest, meaning the countries whose main language comes from Latin. That's where the name comes from, right? Latin America. But pay attention, because here Mexico is not in Anglo-America, okay? It's in Latin America, even though by the previous criterion, it's part of North America. Pretty simple, right? Well, now let's talk about a related topic, which is the colonization of the Americas, because there are some subtleties here that you need to differentiate, okay? First of all, North America was colonized for settlement. In other words, the main goal was to populate the land. But why is that? Mainly because when the Europeans arrived in North America, they found a climate similar to what they were used to in Europe. That's because North America occupies latitudinal zones similar to those of Europe. This makes the climate similar as well, right? At least in some countries. Unlike what happened here in South America, where colonization was mainly for exploitation. In other words, to exploit natural and mineral resources to take back to the mother country. And here in South America, the climate was totally different, right? A predominantly tropical climate, and a land rich in natural and mineral resources. So the Europeans arrived here and found a completely different situation from what they were used to in Europe. That's why here in South America, the focus was essentially on exploitation and strengthening the mother country, right? To extract everything they could from here to enrich the mother country, right? Mainly Portugal and Spain. And this still leaves marks today, right? Here on our continent, which is essentially made up of underdeveloped or developing countries, but essentially countries that industrialized late, right? They took a long time to industrialize, like for example, Brazil, which only started to industrialize in the 1930s. So that's one of the explanations for why North America is more economically developed than South America. All good there? I hope so, but hang in there, okay? Because we're going to talk about two more topics, then I'll let you go, okay? So you can go play Roblox. Let's quickly talk about climate and vegetation. And for that, do you remember that at the beginning of the video, I said that the American continent spans a wide range of latitudes? So that's a key factor for us, okay? For example, while some countries are located at lower latitudes, like Brazil, for instance, whose largest part of the territory is in the tropical zone, North America, for example, has most of its territory in the temperate zone. But does that matter, Professor? It matters a lot because that determines the type of vegetation. For example, which part of our planet receives the most solar radiation? That area is around the equator, right? Which is a very hot and humid area. So that leads to the development of large forests, like the Amazon rainforest in Brazil and the Congo rainforest in Congo, Africa. Unlike the temperate climate zones, which favor the development of another type of vegetation, the so-called temperate forests, which have other characteristics. We won't discuss those here because that's not our main topic, okay? But it's essential for you to know how to relate latitude with climate and vegetation characteristics. All right, we're already reaching the end of the video. Let's wrap up now by talking about the geology and the landforms of the Americas. And about this topic, I'll tell you in advance that we're going to take a general overview, okay? Because our goal is not to be specific. So on the eastern strip of the Americas, we have an older and much more eroded geological structure. In the central strip, we have lower and flatter areas, mainly made up of sedimentary basins. As an example, we have the Amazon plain here in Brazil and the La Plata plain, right? Called the La Plata region, which includes Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and the Mississippi plain over there in the United States. Now here in the western strip, that's where the most interesting landforms are, right? So to speak, it's a more mountainous terrain. For example, here in South America, we have the Andes mountain range. It covers Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. This region is also called Andean America. And as you know, this mountain range is the result of the meeting between two tectonic plates, the Nazca Plate and the South American Plate. They collide, forming this mountainous relief, right? This mountain range. But besides that, we also have the so-called Rocky Mountains, which occupy a strip that goes from the United States to Canada. But just to remind you, this is a general overview, okay? If you want to understand Brazilian landforms in more depth, I'm leaving a video on the screen, okay? I'm sure it will help you. So thanks to you who stayed until the end. Don't forget to like, share, and also leave a comment. That's it. See you next time. Thanks, bye.